Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling and election analysis in the United States. And today we're going to be reacting to Let's Talk Elections, election prediction, and why it's going to be inaccurate coming up in the next presidential election. Make sure to hit the like button to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And so we're going to get into the reaction.
In 2024, and today officially marks 50 days until the 2024 presidential election set to take place this coming November. With less than 2 months to go, this presidential election has taken many different forms. We've seen the political betting markets swing back and forth, and the political betting odds and tabulations on places like Nate Silver's prediction, and on 538, and on The Economist, on the race to the White House.
Already the first mistake. He's relying off of election prognosticators that have been time and time again inaccurate. Nate Silver, who he's referencing right now, just got fired from 538. He was the person who started 538, and they fired him. They kicked him out of his own company because of how inaccurate he was. Like, really? And so it's kind of funny that he brought that up, because 538 is now owned by ABC News, is being run by the person who used to run The Economist, who also let him go. He's not working for The Economist anymore because his 2020 election prediction model had Iowa going to Biden. So it's like all these people have been moved from company to company. There's just more of them now because they've all been fired from each other. It's kind of hilarious.
On multiple forecast sites, this race has truly been a toss-up from the very beginning. And ever since Kamala Harris entered into the race, one thing is
technically the race was a toss-up in the beginning of 2023, but after the political indictments, that's when Trump started leading the national popular vote. So
clear. She has changed the trajectory of this race, all to the benefit of the Democratic Party in a number of these battleground states, as well as on the national landscape, especially when it comes down to down ballot races. A big reason that President Biden said when he was talking about why he decided to drop out of the race was largely because not only were his numbers hurting himself in his candidacy, but also many Democrats down ballot. With Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, the concern for many of these down ballot races isn't as high as it was before, but the presidential race remains as evergreen as always as a battleground overall toss-up scenario, and it is still very competitive 50 days out. And so I thought it'd be interesting. I always do these videos every 2 weeks, an election prediction update. My last one was on September 1st. It just so happens that 50 days out from the election, we end up around the middle of the month here in September, and we're at a really interesting point. We're right after the first and only presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. And we're also at a unique point, too, in that national numbers are starting to turn the tides in favor of Kamala Harris, as well as a number of statewide polls. Some really strong polls today out of the state of Iowa, and on the national level, ABC News and Ipsos showing Kamala Harris up 6 points nationally.
Okay, already another mistake. Ipsos and ABC News, their polls in my scorecard for the presidential election are some of the most inaccurate you could have found. I'll pull up my scorecard right here. I won't show it on screen because I have this screen tab kind of sharing, but we can look at my scorecard, and literally what I did is super simple, guys. All I did was I got the average of the polls from October 2nd to November 2nd of 2020, and I graded them based off how accurate they were to the Biden plus 4.5 victory. That's all I did. I didn't do anything magical. I didn't do nothing. All I did was I just graded the pollsters based on accuracy. And if we go to Ipsos, their D-rated pollster, their average was Biden plus 11.1%, guys. 11.1%. And they missed by 6.6 percentage points. And ABC News from the Washington Post, they had an even worse error. They had Biden plus 12, a 7.5 point miss. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, if Biden won the popular vote by 12, Texas would be lean Democrat. Like, it's completely insane. It's absolutely ridiculous. So he's already going off of things that are basically not adding up. And guys, just to let you guys know, he's paid by the Democrats. Like, he's had pictures with Biden in the White House. He's kind of, it's not even just that. It's like, even on their campaign website for Biden and Harris, like, he was modeling t-shirts for them. He was literally like, you saw him on their website modeling t-shirts for them. Like, he is a paid chill now. It's not like before where it's like a little bit different. He is in fact actually a paid chill now.
In the state of Iowa, we see a poll from Des Moines Register as well as Ann Seltzer. They work together on that poll here. The most accurate pollster in Iowa, dating all the way back to 2008. They say Donald Trump is ahead by just 4 points.
Okay, well, here's the problem with that. This is something he's not going to give context to in this video. Their September polling has historically been very inaccurate. It's always their October poll that ends up being inaccurate. So what's very funny about this is he's facetiously using the Iowa poll to state his argument as to why Iowa is going to be under 5, which we all know is not true. But he's going to use this in his video to say, oh, Iowa's actually going to be a 4-point race because it was the most accurate pollster. But I guarantee you, when they have Trump up by double digits next month, he's not going to have Iowa. He's not going to even bring them up. I can bet money that he's not going to bring them up.
Across the state. The reason why that matters is because Donald Trump won the state by 8 points in the last election, 9 points. And so looking at our total electoral map here, we are in a very interesting circumstance in that this is probably one of the more poor places to be for Donald Trump on the national scale compared to where he has been before. We've seen timeframes. In fact, the immediate aftermath of the presidential debate between Biden and Trump, my prediction there gave Donald Trump not only the states he won in 2016, but expanded beyond that and won the state of Nevada as well, making it 312 electoral votes.
He would have done a lot better than that, by the way. He would have done a lot better than that. Let's Talk Elections just couldn't spin it. Like, the polling was so bad that he couldn't even spin it. Although, looking at the accurate pollsters and certain indicators that Let's Talk Elections will never talk about, like job approval rating and how that's correlated to national vote share, because if he were to actually mention it, it would kind of put a hole in his argument, because Harris's highest approval rating this cycle has been like 48%, and those have been inflated. Her actual job approval is like 46, 47, and the approval ratings usually tend to be accurate indicators of their popular vote shares. And if he had to talk about that on his show, he'd have to admit that Harris is going to get 46 to 48% of the national popular vote. And the problem for that is that's anywhere from 3 to 5 points lower than what Biden got last time around, where he had around a 51, 52% approval rating. So he won't mention that on his show, but, it is what it is.
The margin of victory that was the largest for any Republican in the 21st century, if it came to be true, and would be very strong for Donald Trump against Joe Biden. But obviously, Democrats recognized that that was not the way they wanted to go. They didn't want to slow walk into a second Trump presidency, so instead, they decided that they were going to approach this election differently. Joe Biden dropped out of the race, Kamala Harris came in, and the rest is history. But we are...
Oh, well, nutshell translation for you all. They kissed their asses with 14 million votes, and they forced Biden to drop out of the race. And now they got their supposedly more electable candidate, that's not even a guarantee, by the way. I mean, it's not. I mean, she's polling worse with the Teamsters unions, which is the group that, when you see this map later on, if this map were to come true, she would have to be polling better than Biden with that particular group in order to get the map he's about to show. Because to have Iowa as a 4-point win, she has to be improving with Trump against non-college white voters. And that's the group that she's actually lost the most ground with, even compared to Biden, by the way.
There are 50 days until history is made, with the second female vice nominee for president of the United States on the Democratic ticket. Not to mention the fact that this election, should Kamala Harris be elected, she in fact would be the first woman president, the first Asian American woman president, the first Black woman president. We would be in a position where there would be a lot of history on that end. Another side of the historical aspect of it, too, is that Donald Trump would be the first president to return to office after losing re-election since Grover Cleveland. And so we are really in uncharted territory here. Not much of a precedent set on either side of the aisle here, but overall, this election, as is in the nature of how historical in theory this election would be for both sides, it's still very competitive. And so we're at here, Kamala Harris at 180 electoral votes. Let's throw in Maine's first district here. I would even argue Maine at large, I think recently has moved over more and more so as Kamala Harris has started to grow.
Okay, the reason why he has Maine at large safe, which hasn't been decided by a margin of over 15 points in an election in a very long time. I'll go ahead and find it. The last time that happened was in 1996 when Clinton won it by 21 because Ross Perot got 14% of the popular vote in Maine and took votes away from George W. Bush. So, like, it's like, really? And he's saying that because there was a poll that came out that has Harris up by 17, but we all know that's not going to happen.
Her share of white voters across the country, suburban voters across the country, and started to really make a play for some of these more rural areas the Democrats are undeniably going to lose in. But the whole motto here from the Democratic Party is lose better than before, meaning that they'd rather lose by 30.
She's going to definitely improve with rural voters. Yeah.
Points than 40 points because it helps make up the margin across these states. Maine is one of those states where I think we're going to see an example of how heavy investments in the New England region because of New Hampshire will have a residual effect on a state like Maine, not to mention the fact that Kamala Harris has seen an improvement in terms of favorability, an improvement in terms.
She's gone there once. She actually went to New Hampshire, which, by the way, Ethan, you can't, like, yes, I know you have to cater to your audience. I know if you were actually honest about the election, you'd lose all your subscribers. But I make my support clear for Trump. Like I say, I support Trump, but I am objective about my analysis and I look at all the accurate indicators either way. But you know that if you had to look at the stuff that I looked at, you know undoubtedly that Trump would be up in the popular vote. But the fact she even had to invest in New Hampshire, in the New England area, the fact she even had to go there is a bad sign for her. The fact she actually had to go there is a sign that she's actually losing, and the internals there are looking bad for her as well. So,
in terms of vote share amongst white voters, states like Maine and New Hampshire, huge areas for voters on the Democratic side.
Yeah.
So Kamala Harris had 183 electoral votes in the safe column. Donald Trump right now at 0, but let's go ahead and get through all of his states that we were going to deem to be safe from nearly the very beginning. So these are states like Nebraska, states like Wyoming and South Dakota and North Dakota. You might be surprised to see that at initial glance, not every state you would expect to be safe red is going to be characterized as safe red. So I'm not going to spend too much time really pulling away from that. What I do want to point out is that Donald Trump is in a position with just marginal differences from the 2020 election. Some of these states that used to be characterized as safe that were on the cusp of being likely states. States like Montana.
Guys, even if he loses, he's not doing worse in any of the states. He's not going to do worse in Montana or Kansas or Mississippi or Alaska or Maine's 2nd congressional district or Nebraska's 1st or even Nebraska's 2nd or even Iowa and Ohio. Like, he's going to do better there. Literally, Ethan, if you get your favorite pollsters, Quinnipiac, Marist, and CNN, you get your favorite pollsters and you look at the electoral demographics of it and you apply it to the Cook demographic political report swingometer, if you were to do that, the polls that were off by 7-8 points in the direction of the Democrats, they have Kamala Harris at 270. They have Kamala Harris at 270. She can't even win Georgia or North Carolina or Arizona or even Nevada. Like, she can't even using the worst pollsters, she can't even win them. She cannot. And it's funny because I saw you have your little video. Oh, the 2022 polling errors are such good news for Kamala Harris. But you even know yourself that the midterms are not presidential elections. They are fundamentally different elections. And the fact that you're using the 2022 polling errors is just completely embarrassing to me. I think it's disgraceful that you're doing that because you're lying to your audience. You know that's not going to happen. Like, the midterms and the presidential elections, the coalitions are so different. And you know that's not going to happen, Ethan, because on the presidential ballot, you have the same candidate in all 50 states. In a midterm, you have 2 different sets of candidates in every single ballot. So the possibility of the midterm polling errors happening again is 0%. It's 0%. And you know it's true. How can a polling error with different states, with all different candidates, happen in the exact same states where then the same 2 candidates in all 50 states are on the ballot at the same time? How does that make any sense, Ethan? How are you going to have a polling error from each different state that had 2 different sets of candidates, or at least the 2 candidates were different in every single state? So you're telling me the polling errors from that election are going to happen on a ballot where you have much more non-college educated voters turning out, and you have the same two candidates on all 50 ballots? Come on, man. You know better than this.
Montana that in the last election went to Donald Trump by 16.4%. A reduction of just 1.5% makes Montana a likely state. And I think based on where we are today, we are going to find that Donald Trump does win states like Montana and Kansas and Mississippi, not by safe margins, but by 14, 15, maybe 13-point margins.
So just to let you guys know, he thinks that if this is true, he thinks that Kamala Harris is going to outperform Joe Biden in the popular vote. That's what he thinks. That's why he's filling those in. Because if he didn't think that, he wouldn't be filling those in that way. He thinks that Kamala is going to outperform Joe Biden in the popular vote, which I can bet money on. She will not outperform Joe Biden in the popular vote. She will not. She won't. The same aggregates that he likes to use, even 538 doesn't even have Georgia lean Democrat. Like, I don't understand.
I would say right now, does in fact fit in the characterization as a likely red state. Might be shocking for some Republicans to see it like that, but I want to provide the nuance there because it's important to note this isn't me saying Kamala Harris is going to win these states. It just means based on margin, we have seen some minor reductions.
No shit, Sherlock. Like, okay, yeah, we know she's not going to win them, obviously. But he's not going to lose any of them. Maybe Kansas and South Carolina are likely. Maybe. On a good night for Harris that she wins, maybe I'll give you that. But Mississippi and Montana, dude, come on, man. Dude, your favorite pollsters, Trump's gained like 5 to 10 points in the African-American vote share. We're in Mississippi and Montana. And funny enough, Montana actually has the most pro-Republican black vote out of any state. So if he's gaining even 5 points with black voters in 2024, which he could still lose if that happened, by the way. So I'll give you that. But even if he were to gain 5 points with African-American voters, he wouldn't be winning Montana by under 15. Like,
reductions in these states, but that does actually tell a larger story on the national scale. Getting back to the point here and not getting too lost in the weeds, states like Nebraska's first, Kansas, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Montana will all share a characterization of likely Republican. But Donald Trump will, in fact, win these states by double digits. There are some likely states in the Republican column that are not going to be double-digit victories for Donald Trump, meaning anywhere between 5 to 10 points is going to share that likely characterization. And so you'll see that really come across a number of these battlegrounds. But right now, not even necessarily battlegrounds, across the remaining toss-up states here. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and focus on some of those states that Kamala Harris is going to win by a double-digit margin. And we should also characterize by a likely characterization. States like Colorado, which went to Biden by 13.5 in the last election. I could even see an argument that if things get better for Kamala Harris from now, Colorado becomes safe blue. New Mexico.
Well, smartass, if you were actually telling the truth and being honest with yourself, your prediction would have Colorado already safe. If Donald Trump is losing Montana or winning Montana by under 15 and is down in Kansas by is up in Kansas by 10 and isn't winning Mississippi by a safe margin, Colorado should be safe Democrat. So the fact you don't even have that means you don't even know what you're talking about.
In 2020 went to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris by 10.1%. No reason to believe why we wouldn't see something similar today. I do think, though, it could narrow down a little bit, even if other states are moving in a different direction. I think we have seen some losses in support in some of these states. The Democrats aren't heavily focusing on that do border, the southern border, right? You're talking about groups of voters that might be a little bit more willing to turn away from the Democratic Party at this point in time. But overall, still, Kamala Harris wins the state. And so New Mexico, Colorado are states that I would characterize to be likely Democratic states. But I'd also throw in states like Virginia and Minnesota and New Hampshire. Now, Minnesota, I think as we get closer to Election Day, we'll start to see more data points showing Kamala Harris ahead by 8, 9, 10 points. That's roughly what we saw Tim Walz do back in 2018, and he got really close to that back in 2022. Donald Trump also lost the state in 2016 and lost it in 2020 by 7 points in both Minnesota and New Hampshire. And so it's not too far off.
Funny enough, yes, he did lose it in 2016, but what he leaves out is that Trump only lost it by 1.5 in 2016. He only lost it by 1.5 points. And so, Ethan, you don't make any sense because in New Mexico, if this map with Montana being under 15 points for Trump, New Mexico should be more Democrat than what it was last time. You don't understand how this works. You don't understand how this works because, yes, maybe New Mexico would trend to point Republican. You're right. The southern border is an issue, and it's a way bigger issue than what you're making out in this video. You're acting like it's just going to affect the southern border states, and only by a little bit. It's going to affect every state. It's one of the most important issues in the election, but you'll never talk about that, though. Because if you had to, you know that this prediction you're having right now doesn't
see why they're likely states this time around as well, especially with the vice presidential nominee hailing from the state of Minnesota. In Virginia, it's a state that Biden won by 10 points. Double-digit state, I don't see Kamala Harris underperforming that, and Republicans really have not seen any major investments in the state, despite cries from the Virginia GOP, people like Glenn Youngkin really trying to plead with the national GOP to reinvest in the state, because right now it's a one-man show, and that one-man show is set to leave the governorship in just around a year because he's term limited, and we can't run for re-election.
You see, you could tell that he's biased in this video. Oh, yeah, it's a one-man show. He's going to be term limited. Dude, really, man? The polls, you're not going to say it in this video, but all the polls in Virginia are under 5 points for Harris. All of them. So how is she going to win the state by more than Joe Biden did last time? And she's only in the polls right now for 538, your favorite website. She's up in all the polls by like less than 5. There's like one poll that has her up by 8. But Joe Biden, when he won the state by almost 11, he was up in the polls by 14, 15, 16, 17 points. So they still missed in his direction in the polls. So how is she going to outperform Joe Biden if she's polling like 10 to 15 points worse depending on the poll? Like, what? Come on.
Anyways, besides that point, Virginia, Minnesota, Colorado, New Mexico, New Hampshire, all likely Democratic states. I'd also throw in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, a state that I do think right now Kamala Harris is in a district that I think Kamala Harris is in a really strong position to do quite well in. I also have Nebraska's 1st as the likely red district. That's how it was back in 2020. Don't think much is going to change, especially that Kamala Harris and her campaign are investing nearly $10 million in the Omaha region. The Trump campaign, in contrast, is spending $0. Democrats are investing heavily in this one district in Nebraska. It has residual effects on surrounding districts in the state and in the region. And the Omaha area is going to see a benefit for Kamala Harris because of the investments her campaign and herself are making in this region of the United States. And so this brings us to roughly 190 electoral votes. Now, you might be surprised to see states like Texas and Florida and Alaska currently characterized as toss-ups. And I give you that. I think that right now where we are, these states are going to be Republican states. But it is the margin at which I am most intrigued by that I think will really help dictate how the rest of this map goes. Now, a recent data point out of Alaska shows Donald Trump ahead by just 4 to 5 points in the state of Alaska. That's repetitive, but this was, and to say Alaska again, Alaska Survey Research, the most accurate pollster in this state. Now, it has never been a battleground state. Democrats have not won Alaska dating back very...
What? What? What do you mean? What do you mean? Hold on. Let's look this up. Hold on. I want to make sure I get this right before I say anything. Hold on. Wait a minute. Okay, he's up by 5 in the poll. Hey, buddy, your little poll is not the most accurate poll in Alaska. Why are you lying to your audience? It's not the most accurate poll. You're literally lying to your audience. Why? I just checked 538. Their last poll was Trump plus 4. The same poll from right now. And he won by 10 points. Why are you lying to your... Bro, you're dead ass lying to your audience. Bro, the last poll was Trump plus 4. He won it by 10. The poll that just came out in June and July of 2020 was Trump plus 1. Are you serious, bro? Like, how can you lie with a straight face to your audience? It was not the most accurate pollster. 538's last poll for the state for that particular pollster you just mentioned is Trump plus 4, and he won it by 10. That's a 6-point miss. That's double the margin of a standard polling error, buddy.
Very, very long time. Over half a century was the last time the Democrats won in the state of Alaska. In 1964 was when Lyndon B. Johnson beat Barry Goldwater in this state by 32 points. But since then, it has been practically Ruby Republican. Up until recently, when Donald Trump won the state by 10.1%, and then 2 years later, they elected a Democratic congresswoman to represent them across the state against Sarah Palin, the Trump handpicked candidate, former governor and vice presidential nominee for John McCain in 2008. Alaska went to the Democratic Party. And what we have seen here is a recent tightening up. I gave it a little bit more discussion than I have historically because of this new poll. Because of, again, this most accurate pollster in the state that really helps dictate how Alaska goes and what we are
seeing. Ethan, why are you lying? It was Trump +4 as their final poll in 2020. Why are you lying? There's like, dude, how much did they pay you? How much did Harris pay you, dude? How much is, because I could understand she paid you and you can kind of like wiggle your way around the information. But you're just lying, bro. Right now, you're just lying, dude. You're literally lying. The last poll was Trump +4, bro. You're literally lying. You're lying to their faces. And you're like, oh, yeah, they'll never know. They trust me. Come on, man.
Seeing here is that Republicans are in a position where they aren't as strong as they were in 2020, not as strong as they were in 2016, and certainly not as strong as they were in 2012 or 2008. And so right now I say Alaska is a likely red state. Beyond that point, too, we have 187 remaining electoral votes. 187 remaining electoral votes. As I said, Texas and Florida are going to go to the Republican Party. But right now, I will say Democrats have a huge war chest and might start investing in these states. I don't think they're necessarily going to win these states, but they are going to be in a position where they are going to lay out the groundwork to win in the future. Overall, I think Texas and Florida should be characterized as lean Republican states. Now, in my recent prediction,
Ethan, do you not know what the registration lead in Florida is? It's a 1 million plus lead for the GOP. It is almost statistically impossible for Harris to lose the state by under 5 points, Ethan. Trump won it by 3.5 last time. How is he going to... You're telling me he's going to do worse in Florida? Don't tell me, dude. How are the Democrats going to have a lead in the registrations by 80,000 votes on election day in 2020, lose the state by 3.5, and then somehow magically Kamala Harris is going to do better when now the registration lead is a +1 million vote lead for the Republicans? Ethan, explain that to me. Texas is not going to be under 5. Donald Trump has been improving with Hispanic voters in the polling data by 10 to 15 points. Texas is one of the most populated Hispanic states in the entire nation. It's not going to be under 5, Ethan. The polls that had Trump leading by 1, the aggregate of polls by 1, he's now up 5, 6 points in the state in the average. Get out of here with this crap.
I had Florida as a likely red state. I do think that we're starting to see the tides turn ever so slightly, and continuous data points out of the state are showing us that it is narrowing down a little bit more than it needs to be for the Republicans. You see, I've been under the opinion that Donald Trump would win Florida by 5, 6, 7 points. I now think he's probably somewhere in the range of 3, 4, 5 points. I think Florida has seen a change over time, over the past 2 years, over the past 4 years. But I do think at this point in time, based on who Kamala Harris is bringing back into the Democratic Party, how they're expanding the vote share amongst white voters and inspiring a vote base in Florida, combined with the abortion referendum on the ballot, I don't doubt Donald Trump wins Florida, but I think he's somewhere around 4.5 to 5 points rather than 6, 7, 8, 9 points like he was against Joe Biden. So Florida, for now, is going to be a lean red state.
That race was not a 6, 7 point race, buddy. It was going to be a plus 15-point margin. Trump was going to absolutely smoke Joe Biden in the state of Florida. Completely. You never mention him, but the People's Pundit, which has the most accurate state polling in the nation, by the way, the only state he got wrong was Arizona. Every other state he pulled it correctly, and he missed in both directions, which is what pollsters should do. They should have misses in both directions by at least under 3 points. That's a good sign that they're inaccurate on his pollster. But they polled the state in February and in March of earlier this year, and Trump was ahead by 14 in the state. So how are you going to tell me that it was going to be a 6-7 point race? Come on, man.
Texas, I'm a little bit more cynical on for Republicans here. I still think they're going to win the state, but when I say I mean win the state, that doesn't mean it's going to be 10 points. In 2020, it was 5.6. I think it'll be closer this time around, and I think it will continue to be closer until it flips blue. Texas is a state that Democrats are going to start investing in. Whether now,
this is the guy. It's his little wet dream. It's his little wet dream. He loves, dude. It's like, dude, he just. I'm not gonna even say anything. Like, dude, it's his little wet dream. Like he wants it so bad to happen, guys. But I hate to break it to him, it's not gonna happen because Trump's gonna improve in the southern border again. He's going to improve there again. And the same polls that had him losing or tied or up by 1 or 2 points now have him up 6, 7, 8, 9 points in the state of Texas. And they still have a tied electorate or like an R+1, R+2 electorate in the state. And he's still leading. He's still up by 8, 9, 10 points. And the electorate in Texas, by the way, is like R+10. So, just saying, the polls are going to be wrong in Texas again.
Now, whether later, that's up to them. But it is a state that has been what used to be the Republican Party's California, a massive electoral vote dump routinely electable for the Republican Party now today, being far more competitive than it has ever been. The Senate race here is even more competitive. Definitely would encourage taking a look at that race as well. So, now we're down to the 117 electoral votes that I think are going to truly determine the outcome.
Notice he still hasn't filled in Iowa and Ohio. He still hasn't filled them in.
Of this race. Overall, I think where we are on the national standpoint, Democrats are really focused on 7 states. Republicans are really focused on 7 states. There are more than 7 states on this electoral map right now. And that is just by the nature of some of these states that historically have been more competitive, being, I want to be competitive this time around, but not really, right? For some of these states like Ohio and Iowa, we know how they're going to go. For some districts like Maine 2nd that has shown recent tightening in some of the data points out of that district, yes, we know that they used to be competitive and used to be states the Democrats would fight for, campaign, and etc., but they aren't going to be truly that competitive. The residual effect of swing states is that they do show some signs of tightening. They do sway with the nation because there are swing voters in these states. In fact, there's swing voters all across the nation. But they're at the edge here, where they used to be far more competitive. And when we do start to see some reductions, they do raise some alarm bells for the national candidates, but they don't raise enough to say that they are going to sway in the opposite way. For instance, a state like Ohio. I think J.D. Vance being on the ticket there does, in fact, help Donald Trump here. Regardless, he was going to win the state by probably 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points.
What a shocker, dude. What a shocker. Wow.
Depending on where we are. Shocker, moving over to the state of Iowa, though, what we saw out of that new Ann Seltzer poll was that Donald Trump is ahead by 4 points in this state. Now, that is certainly alarming. This is a state, again, that Donald Trump won by 9 points, 8, 9 points in the last election in 2016. It was nearly 10. And so Iowa's a state that historically had actually been pretty strong for the Democratic Party. You can see in 2012, they won by 5.6. In 2008, they won by 9.5. And so Donald Trump really changed the trajectory of Iowa. But now that it's tightening again, I really do trust Ann Seltzer. I will say she's one of the few pollsters that I will completely push past my prediction in favor of hers and really understanding her methodology and her current assessment of the race. And right now, Iowa is a state that I would say
you gotta be kidding me. Are you serious, Ethan? Ethan, you know that her September polling is inaccurate. What's actually funny about this is that this same month, Trump was tied in the state with Biden. And then the next month, they got Trump +7. And he ended up winning by 8. So they still underestimated him, by the way. You know that her September polling is not accurate. You know that. And you're using this as your little facetious thing. Oh, it's the most accurate pollster. So it's Trump +4. But you got to put some context to it, my man. You got to put some context to it. It's not under 5. You know that. Oh, my God.
Lean Republican, largely because of this poll. I know we rarely ever give that much merit and credit to the polls that we see and analyze on this channel, but I will say this. There are very few polls that I think genuinely provide near perfect context and understanding of how certain states go. Iowa has the Des Moines Register and Ann Seltzer. Alaska has Alaska Survey Research. Many other states really don't have that perfect poll, but these 2 states do, and that's why they're getting a little bit more attention than normal. But Iowa narrowing down is something that I think is quite interesting. I do believe, though, in about a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it'll go back to being likely red, and I wouldn't be shocked if it does. Just right now, it seems to be that Donald Trump is seeing some losing of support in the Midwestern region, where he really, really can't afford to lose any support across the remaining battleground states. And so moving over to Maine's 2nd District 2.
Literally gain like a bunch of points in the Midwest region in like every poll, even your favorite pollsters, New York Times, Quinnipiac, everywhere. He's gained in the Midwest region when they break it down by region. So I don't know what you're talking about.
That brings me to that point. I think this one is also going to be a lean Republican state. It's a state that Democrats,
dude, are you serious? Oh my God, I'm not gonna even say anything.
The district the Democrats used to win, but
copying the poll that came out. There's a poll that had a Trump up by like 3 in the district, and he's just saying what that poll said. He's not mentioning it, but that's what it is.
Not by too much. Donald Trump really tapped into the base there, really drove them out to vote for him in 2016, then again in 2020. I would say right now it's a lean Republican district. It has seen some tightening, especially with Jared Golden being a relatively popular Democratic congressman from Maine 2nd. And I do think too, Democrats again investing into the New England region, investing in areas that the Trump campaign simply doesn't have the money or cash on hand to do.
They do have the money or the cash on hand to do it, by the way. I don't know what you're talking about. They could do it. I mean, Trump went to New York. What do you mean? You're lying, bro. Bro, what are you talking about? He just went to New York. He went to the New York, like, dude, he just went to New York, man. He just went there to help out the congressional districts and to maybe get it under 10 for Kamala Harris. Like, and she had to invest her shit to go to New Hampshire because she's only up by a point or 2 in New Hampshire.
Do so. That's where you're starting to see some of the benefit there. And I think Democrats have a really coordinated effort to win back some of these white working class voters. Maine has a lot of them. Maine 2nd certainly does as well. And so now this brings us to a point. 93 remaining electoral votes that are, as I've been saying for the entire campaign period now, the states that both parties are really only focused on. As much as they announced that they're opening campaign field offices in Florida, Minnesota, Virginia, Texas, the main focus are these 7 states, and they are going to receive $500 million in advertisement spending between now and Election Day. It's insane to think about, but our current American reality. And so these 93 toss-up electoral votes, there are some states that are more positive for Trump and more positive for Harris than others. And I want us to really understand and unpack that. At face value, these are all states except for North Carolina that went to Biden back in 2020. These are all states besides the state of Nevada that went to Trump in 2016. And so it really is anybody's game depending on how the national landscape ends up. But after this first presidential debate, in the day and age today, voters were to vote today, how voters view that first presidential debate. They view Donald Trump, Kamala Harris after that first presidential debate. We are in a position now where Kamala Harris is probably riding pretty high and doing quite well in the state. And so what are we finding? Donald Trump in these states, rather not in the state, in these states. Kamala Harris will probably be able to win in the state of Wisconsin, win in the state of Michigan, win in the state of Pennsylvania. These are all states the Democrats have been focusing on really heavily over the past 3.5 years because they know.
Yep. The states where Donald Trump is currently polling 5 to 7 points better in. Yeah, so the states that he's polling 5 points better in. Yep, he's Kamala Harris is going to gain from Joe Biden's performance.
These are amongst the most competitive ones in the entire country. Kamala Harris, I think, would provide them that electoral college vote victory. And that's enough. That brings her to 270 electoral votes, but that isn't really too much of a shock, right? And we're talking about a time frame like this where she does really well at the first debate. She does really well nationally. Why is it that she's stuck at just 270 electoral votes? Well, honestly, I don't think she's stuck at 270 electoral votes.
I just noticed he hasn't mentioned a single national poll. Not one. He hasn't mentioned not a single national poll right now in this entire video.
I think she's on track to do better than this. And where does that come in? In some states that are pretty likely to see how they come in. States like Nevada, where I do think that Kamala Harris is in a position similar to Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden that she wins this state, relies on the traditional.
But how in the world is Harris going to do better? It's going to do worse in Nevada, but magically do better in Wisconsin. You do realize that both of them have a lot of non-college educated voters, right? Like, I don't think he understands this, guys. Like, if Nevada goes red, Wisconsin's going red. I don't really think he gets that, but okay.
Democratic voting base there. I do think you do lose some support, as I've been saying, in some of these states, given the fact that the border crisis for Democrats really isn't an issue that they're winning on, but it does, in fact, find that Kamala Harris, being from this region of the United States, having won elections in similar areas, a competitive attorney general's race, winning in her Senate race too, and not to mention the fact that Nevada, again, is a state that Republicans haven't cracked since 2004. It's always this election until it's not, and then it's the next election until it's not. And so looking at Nevada right now, I do think Kamala Harris is the favorite based on history, based on current standing, based on national standing. I would say Nevada is a very tilt Democratic state. But regardless, the victory is a victory, winner take all. Kamala Harris gets all 6 electoral votes. I was previously also a bit more cynical on the state of Arizona for Kamala Harris for a number of reasons. But as of late, I've come to understand more and understanding how abortion referendums impact.
Dude, it's like the ranked number 4 or 5 issue in the whole country, buddy. Like, it's not going to have the impact that you think it's going to have. It matters more during a midterm because Donald Trump made it a state issue. So since he made it a state issue, that's why it affected the states more, because now everything got pushed back to the states. So that's why it affected the midterms more, but it's not going to affect the presidential level because guess what? He doesn't have to worry about the issue anymore. It's not a national issue anymore. He doesn't have to worry about it. So when people go vote, they're not going to think, oh, Donald Trump's going to take my right away. They could vote at the state level to get that fixed.
Up ballot races. For instance, you've seen a lot of organizing, millions of dollars of organizing in Arizona recently surrounding the abortion referendum. And voters who get out to vote, largely in favor of a pro-choice amendment, are probably voting blue too, even if they aren't necessarily inspired by Kamala Harris or Ruben Gallego or whoever's running on their bottom ballot ticket. Arizona is a state where you could see a narrow pushover, similar to Katie Hobbs, because of this issue of abortion that does drive voters out, even if Republicans have set up a better campaign in the state. If on the issues, Republicans win over the majority of voters in the state. At fundamental baseline, 2022 showed this. Arizona is a state that is competitive, and when faced with the option of Trump versus not, more often than not, they're choosing the not option. And I think that will be the case.
The midterms are not the presidential elections, Ethan. You know this. You understand that college-educated voters were more Republican in the 2010s, and that's why they ended up being more Republican. That's why the elections, when it broke as a red wave, it was a big red wave because college-educated voters were disproportionately turning out for those races, even more so back then, actually. And that's why the races broke so red. But now those voters are now Democrats, and that's why Democrats outperformed in 2022. But you couldn't even tell me why they outperformed. You just think it's Trump bad. But that's not the reason why. It's because college-educated voters are more Democrat, and more of them come out during midterms than presidential years. It's just the truth.
This election, Kamala Harris will narrowly get by, similar to Joe Biden. And I do think Arizona right now is a tilt Democratic state. And so this brings us to the final 2 states, North Carolina and Georgia. And it actually is quite surprising, where we are in these states. Kamala Harris's campaign has seemed to invest a lot of money in the state of North Carolina, investing even more than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. She's visiting the state more than both of these candidates and is focusing on a lot of the youth.
If the odds ever flip in North Carolina, guys, free money, by the way.
Initiatives in these states. Look at the collegiate chapters for Kamala Harris in the state of North Carolina. Look at what she's doing, getting Tim Walz to visit a number of these college campuses, not only in North Carolina. He's doing so across the Midwest, across the southwestern region of the United States. But North Carolina is a state that I think we've seen a unique interest from Kamala Harris's candidacy because of the fact that Asian American voters and Black voters in North Carolina comprise of a major part of the voting population in the state and really do drive voters to turn out candidates like Kamala Harris. When you're talking about North Carolina, a big reason I think that Barack Obama was able to win there in 2008 was the fact that he inspired groups of the Democratic electorate that traditionally are not inspired by people like Joe.
She's not going to do that, by the way. I don't know why you think that, but she's not.
Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
Not to mention the fact that just in an enthusiastic campaign, it takes that for Democrats to win in North Carolina. It can't be a settle for Biden campaign. It can't be a never, a Bernie or bust campaign that wins a state like North Carolina. It needs to be a unified Democratic Party that inspires both older and younger voters.
Which it's not, by the way. It's not a unified Democrat Party. There's a bunch of people that didn't like the fact that they threw out Joe Biden. There's also a lot of people who don't like the way Israel and Hamas war is being handled. There's some Israel Democrats. There's some not Israel Democrats. And the reason why Kamala Harris passed up on Josh Shapiro as her VP is because there's a bunch of anti-Semites in the Democratic Party. And if he had picked her, then probably she would have done worse with that demographic.
both minority and white voters. And in North Carolina, I think we're seeing that perfect medium where Kamala Harris right now, despite what we have seen in historical elections, is the narrow favorite to win the state right now. Now, this is the current state of the race, riding high after the debate and doing really well in terms of fundraising and organizing in battleground states. Things can change in 50 days. But 50 days out, I think North Carolina might be the state that next votes blue and Georgia votes red. Now, that might shock you, and I forgive you if it is.
Whoa. Hold on. Wait, what?
Because in 2020, when I was thinking about, these predictions here, that Georgia would go blue, but Florida would not, I was really flabbergasted, right? I even had my own prediction back in 2020 that North Carolina and Florida would also be voting blue because it didn't make sense. Georgia was a state that we saw Donald Trump win by 5.6 in 2016, 5.1 rather. I'm overinflating.
You get stuck with the conventional wisdom, bro. You get stuck in your own little bubble. You get stuck in. You don't even understand your own base. You don't even understand it. You don't even understand that. A lot of African Americans moved to Georgia. Atlanta had a large, basically, boom for Biden during 2020 because he did better in the suburbs. And there's more of a. I don't know exactly which state has more of a black electorate, but I would assume Georgia does now, because it now votes to the left of North Carolina. And also, Trump did slightly worse with college-educated voters compared to 2016. And there's Atlanta, and you have a lot of colleges there, and that could have explained that shift there too. And a lot of first-time voters in Atlanta and Georgia in general broke for Biden. But North Carolina is now voting to the left of Georgia, man. And it's if Georgia's going red, North Carolina is going red too, man. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
5.1. Florida went to Trump by just 1.2. North Carolina, arguably, by 3.7 less than Georgia. But 4 years later, North Carolina ended up narrowing just 2 points. Florida ended up shifting right 2 points. But Georgia shifted nearly 6 points to the left. North Carolina, I think, could be in that case right now. Now, not 6 points. I think Kamala Harris, if she wins the state, it will happen narrowly. But based on the investments we are seeing in North Carolina, and the fact is Kamala Harris is getting her biggest rally.
Because if Harris is winning North Carolina, she probably is winning Arizona by like more than a tilt margin, and is winning Nevada by like probably even 3, and probably even wins Georgia by a point or 2, and Michigan would probably be likely at that point. Like, this guy's prediction doesn't even make sense to his own base.
Rallies out of this battleground state in particular, in contrast with Georgia, which I do think Democrats stand to have a really good fighting chance here. But if 2022 showed me anything, it was that even with the worst, lackluster candidates, even in the 2021 runoffs, Georgia was still fundamentally so exceptionally conservative that Democrats couldn't win by more than 2. Right now, North Carolina is a state that is conducive to Democratic victories. We see it in the governor elections that coincide with the presidential elections. Not to mention that this governor election with Mark Robinson will have a negative effect on Donald Trump's candidacy.
Because there's no way this guy believes in reverse coattails. It's never existed. It's never happened. It's been a laughing stock in the industry to suggest that could happen, man. Ethan, explain this to me. So you're telling me that someone's going to go out there, and maybe there's a few people. It's going to be like 10, bro. It's going to be like 10 people. You're going to tell me everyone's going to go out there and be like, well, I'm going to vote for Trump. Oh, Mark Robinson's a Republican? Oh, let me vote for Kamala Harris instead because, oh, Mark Robinson's the Republican? Oh, that doesn't make any sense. Let me go ahead and vote for Kamala Harris instead. Really, man? Really, bro? Oh, my God. Come on, man.
So many voters are turning out to vote for Democrat Josh Stein. They are more than likely to vote for Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, even if they were otherwise thinking
about it. You don't even make any sense. There's a bunch of Trump Stein voters in North Carolina. That's how he won by 4.5, and Trump won by 1.5. There's a 5-point difference. You don't realize, I don't think you realize that there is a large amount of the electorate that voted for Josh Stein, or that, voted for Roy Cooper in 2020, that now, that also voted for Donald Trump. And there's going to be a lot of Trump Stein voters too, by the way. But they're not going to change their vote to Kamala Harris because they're voting for Stein. That doesn't work like that.
Not voting at all. And so overall, across our electoral map here, what we end up with is 303 electoral votes for Kamala Harris and 235 for Donald Trump. North Carolina flips blue. Georgia flips red. Overall, though, Kamala Harris wins with over 270 electoral votes.
Unbelievable.
Now, 50 days out, this is an election prediction that I would certainly want to revisit on election day and
Yeah, you
afterwards,
better.
because we're in a really interesting people on the ground in this state. And map here, 303 for Kamala.
Yeah, you better bet your ass you better revisit that prediction, because if I were you better revisit that one, because that prediction is cooked, bro. Your prediction's cooked, bro. The same pollsters that underestimated Trump in the national level by multiple points have Kamala Harris down multiple points from Joe Biden's margins from the previous election. Like, really, man? Come on. Come on, dude. You know your prediction's cooked. You know you're bought out. We all know. It's no hiding it, man. You could just tell them. Like, I don't understand why you don't tell them you work for the campaign. You literally lied that Alaska poll was the most accurate poll. It wasn't, in fact, the most accurate poll. It was a Trump +4 as their final poll, and Alaska was Trump +10. So you lied to your audience. You're doing a disservice when analyzing these elections by coloring in the map like a little kindergartner. But yeah, bro, you're cooked, bro. You're cooked. You really are. All right, guys, that's it for my reaction. Make sure to hit the like button to subscribe if you guys want more content just like this. And I will see you guys very, very soon.